It was 7:48 p.m. when the family group chat lit up with a new message from my mom. "We think it's best you step away for now." No emojis, no explanation, just that single clinical sentence that made my stomach drop. I stared at it, blinking, thinking maybe there was more coming. Maybe she'd hit send too soon, but the dots never appeared. My dad's name showed up next, just a thumbs-up reaction to her message. And then silence. I didn't reply. Not yet. Because if I said what I wanted to say right then, there'd be no going back. And part of me still thought maybe this was some bizarre misunderstanding. But I didn't have to respond. My aunt did. And she didn't hold back. The irony? That same morning, I'd sent her a photo of the thrift store chair I'd finally reupholstered. The one she'd helped me haul from the flea market 2 months ago. We'd been laughing about how ugly it used to be. Now her name popped up in the chat with 3 simple words. "Explain this now." My dad immediately replied, "This isn't for debate." My aunt ignored him and went on typing, her bubble blinking for a long, satisfying stretch. I could almost hear her voice in my head, sharp, unyielding, the way she'd sounded the day she shut down a cousin for mocking my college major. "You don't get to push someone out without telling them why," she wrote. "Unless you're afraid the truth will make you look bad." I gripped my phone so tightly my knuckles went white. She was right. The truth would make them look bad. Because this wasn't about me being difficult or dramatic. This was about money and boundaries. And the fact that 2 weeks earlier, I had refused to co-sign yet another temporary loan for my brother, who still hadn't paid back the last 3. I'd gotten a taste of what life looked like when I stopped being the family safety net. And apparently, they hated it. The group chat was quiet for exactly 23 minutes after her message. And I know that because I kept checking, my pulse hammering, counting each one. At 8:11 p.m., my mom finally wrote back, "This is between us and her." My aunt fired back instantly, "Not anymore." That was the moment I knew. Whatever came next, I wasn't alone in this fight. And my parents were about to learn that cutting me out wouldn't be as clean as they thought. Because my aunt had receipts, and I had patience, and neither of us planned to back down. They thought my silence meant I was rattled, but it was strategy. I wasn't going to type a single word into that chat until they showed their cards. And they did, faster than I expected. At 9:02 p.m., my mom sent me a private message, separate from the group. "We need space from your negativity." Negativity. That was her word for me refusing to drain my savings so my brother could keep his business afloat. The same. Business that, according to the state's public records, hadn't paid taxes in over a year. I didn't reply. I forwarded the message to my aunt instead. Her typing bubble appeared in the group chat less than a minute later. Negativity? Is that what you're calling financial boundaries now? My dad broke in with, "This is family business. You don't need to insert yourself." Her response was so fast it was almost like she'd been waiting for him to say it. "I am family, and I've watched you use her like an ATM since she was 22. My pulse spiked. No one had ever said it out loud before. Not like that, not in front of them. I could picture my mom sitting at the kitchen table, her jaw tight, my dad pacing with his phone in hand, both of them calculating what to say next. But the truth is, there wasn't much they could say without admitting what they'd been doing for years. The chat went dead again. 10 minutes passed. 15. I opened Instagram just to distract myself, but then my phone buzzed. This time it wasn't the group chat, it was my email. Subject line, bank transfer request. It was from Farpshuri, my bank, confirming that a transfer request in the amount of $4,800 had been denied because the account holder, me, had locked all external transactions 2 weeks ago. My chest went hot. They'd actually tried again. While telling me to step away, they'd been hoping I'd left a back door open. I screenshotted the email and sent it straight to my aunt. Her reply was only 2 words. "Send it." I knew exactly what she meant. We were about to drop that screenshot in the family chat. And once we did, there would be no pretending this was about negativity ever again. At 9:48 p.m., the screenshot went into the family group chat without a single caption. Just the image, the bank's logo, the denied transfer, the exact dollar amount, and the date. For 20 seconds, nothing happened. Then my brother's name popped up. Wow, really? You're going to make this about money? My aunt's reply was instant. It is about money. And it's about the fact that you keep trying to take hers. He tried to spin it, said it was a misunderstanding, that he thought he had permission, that he just needed to cover payroll for a week. But I'd heard that line before. Payroll, rent, car repairs, emergency vet bills. Every time there was a new excuse, but the result was the same. Money gone, no repayment guilt trip when I asked about it. My dad jumped in to defend him, talking about how family supports each other in hard times, as if the past decade of my life had been one endless season of charity work for their bad decisions. I stayed silent, letting my aunt take the lead. She wasn't just defending me. She was dismantling their whole narrative piece by piece. Hard times end, she typed. This is theft. That word, theft, landed like a brick. No one in the family had ever labeled it that way, but once it was said, it couldn't be unsaid. The typing bubbles disappeared. Then, at 10:03 p.m., my mom finally replied with the most brittle sentence I'd ever read from her. We didn't raise you to be so cold. I sat there staring at it, feeling that old tug in my chest, the one that used to make me fold, apologize, and open my wallet again. But not this time. Instead, I typed one sentence and hit send before I could overthink it. I'm done funding my own mistreatment. And then I muted the chat. My aunt called me 30 seconds later, her voice low and steady. Good. Now we make it official. She meant no more unspoken agreements, no more informal loans, a legal line in the sand. If they wanted access to me or my money, they were going to hit a wall they couldn't talk their way around. And the next morning, I was ready to start building it. By 8:15 the next morning, I was sitting at my kitchen table with my laptop open, a mug of coffee going cold beside me, and my aunt on speakerphone. She'd already emailed me a template for a formal no-contact letter, the kind that doubles as documentation if things ever turn legal. Keep it short, keep it clear, and don't leave room for loopholes, she said. My hands shook a little as I typed, but not from fear. From the sheer weight of finally doing something that drew an unbreakable boundary. I stated in writing that I would no longer be providing loans, gifts, or financial assistance of any kind to my parents or my brother. That all communication about money was to go through my attorney. That any attempt to access my accounts without permission would be treated as fraud. My aunt read it over in real time, making tiny edits. Tightening a phrase here, adding a legal term there. When it was done, she said, "Send it to yourself first, then to me. We'll timestamp it." At 9:02 a.m., the letter hit my inbox. By 9:07, it was in hers. And at 9:15, it was sitting in the family group chat, replacing the silence that had stretched overnight. My brother read it first. I could tell by the scene status. He didn't respond. My mom read it next, and the typing bubble appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, she sent, "So this is how you want it to be?" I didn't answer. My aunt did. "It's how it needs to be." Less than 2 minutes later, my dad left the chat entirely. My mom followed. My brother stayed in, probably hoping to keep tabs, but my aunt just added one last line. "We're not doing this anymore." I sat back in my chair, the apartment suddenly feeling bigger, quieter, like I could breathe without bracing for the next demand. And then my aunt said something I'll never forget. "They'll spin this to make you the villain. Let them. It doesn't change the truth." That was when I realized this wasn't just the end of a toxic pattern. It was the start of my life without it. And I wasn't going back. The fallout started within hours. By noon, my cousin messaged me privately. "Just so you know, they're telling everyone you cut the family off for no reason." I didn't bother defending myself. The people who mattered either already knew the truth or would see it soon enough. My aunt told me to stay off social media for the day, which turned out to be smart advice. Because by evening, screenshots from the group chat had somehow made their way to a couple of extended relatives, stripped of all context except my no-contact letter. One of them even called me, voice dripping with fake concern, asking if I was sure this is the hill you want to die on. I told her, "It's not a hill, it's my bank account and my sanity." She hung up. Meanwhile, my aunt was busy in ways I didn't fully understand until later. She'd contacted her friend, a paralegal, to quietly check whether any accounts with my name had been linked to my brother's business. 2 hours later, she called me with the update. There had been an attempt to add me as a guarantor on a line of credit 3 weeks ago, but it had been flagged and denied because my credit freeze was still in place. That news made my skin crawl. Not only had they been trying to siphon money from me directly, they'd been trying to attach me to debt I didn't even know about. At 6:42 p.m., my aunt sent me a text. "Check the family chat." I opened it to see she had posted a single sentence and nothing else. Identity theft is still a crime, even if it's just family. The red receipts rolled in one by one. No one replied. Not my mom, not my dad, not my brother. The silence wasn't victory exactly, but it was the closest thing I'd ever had to it. And for the first time in years, I slept that night without my phone under my pillow, waiting for the next emergency they'd create to pull me back in. The next day, I went into full lockdown mode. Every account, every password, every two-factor authentication was updated, even my streaming services, because I remembered how my brother once used my Netflix login to borrow my Amazon Prime info. I called my bank to put an official fraud watch on all activity tied to my name, and the woman on the line didn't even try to hide her concern when she saw the recent denied transfer attempt. "It's a good thing you had those blocks in place," she said. My aunt wasn't done either. She'd reached out to her friend in the local credit union to check for any joint applications or sudden inquiries with my SSN. By 3:30 p.m., we had confirmation. 2 new attempts had been made that week alone. Both denied. The pit in my stomach wasn't fear anymore. It was a cold, focused anger. At 5:17 p.m., my mom finally broke her silence in the group chat with a single line. "This is getting blown out of proportion." My aunt answered before I could. "No, this is proportionate to what's been happening for years." My brother tried to jump in with, "We're family. Stop acting like strangers." But I typed back for the first time in 2 days. "Strangers don't have this much access to my bank account." And then I dropped the part I'd been holding on to. A PDF attachment of the no-contact letter, now signed and notarized. There was no undoing it now. The chat went completely dead. No read receipts from my parents this time. Just my brother still sitting there, probably calculating his next angle. But I wasn't playing anymore. My aunt called me that night and said, "They're going to hate that they can't control the narrative." I told her, "Let them hate it. I'm done living in their version of events." And for the first time in my adult life, I really meant it. 2 days later, the ripple effect hit. An older cousin messaged me on Facebook, clearly fishing for my side of the story but lacing every question with guilt. "Your mom's really upset. Can't you just smooth things over?" I didn't engage. Instead, I sent a single screenshot, the denied $4,800 transfer request, and told her, "This is why I won't." She read it and never replied. My aunt, meanwhile, had shifted into what she called containment mode. She drafted a short statement we could send to any relative who tried to intervene. "This is a private legal matter. Please respect my boundaries." Clean, calm, and impossible to twist into more drama. That Friday, I learned just how deep this had gone. My aunt's paralegal friend forwarded me a redacted report showing that 6 months ago, my parents had tried to add me as a co-signer on a personal loan for $12,000. The application was denied, but no one had told me it happened. I sat at my kitchen table staring at the report, feeling this strange mix of betrayal and relief. Betrayal because they'd been plotting this for months. Relief because every safeguard I'd put in place had actually worked. At 8:02 p.m., I posted a vague message on my private Instagram story. Sometimes closing the door is the most loving thing you can do for yourself. No names, no details. Still, within an hour, my mom texted, "You're making us look bad." I didn't respond. My aunt, though, sent me a final piece of advice before we both went to bed. Block them everywhere. They'll try every door. Lock them all. And that night, I did. One by one. Every platform. Every contact point. My phone was quieter than it had been in years, and instead of feeling empty, it felt safe. By the following week, the quiet had turned into something I didn't recognize at first: peace. No surprise calls in the middle of work. No guilt-soaked texts asking for just a little help. No watching my phone like a ticking bomb. I started noticing how much space I'd been giving to them in my head. Space I could now use for my own life. My aunt invited me over for dinner that Sunday, and for the first time in years, I walked into a family setting without bracing for confrontation. She'd made roast chicken and potatoes, and while we ate, she slid an envelope across the table. Inside was a printout of every attempt they'd made to access my accounts over the past year, pulled from the fraud alerts and bank logs she'd been quietly collecting. "In case you ever need it," she said. My chest felt tight, not from fear, but from the realization that someone in this family had been protecting me without asking for anything in return. Later that night, back at my apartment, I filed the envelope away with my other documents. That's when I saw something that stopped me: a dusty shoebox tucked behind my filing cabinet. Inside were years' worth of receipts, texts, and handwritten IOUs from my parents and brother. Some were so old they'd been written on lined notebook paper, signed with promises they'd never kept. I spread them out on the table, taking pictures of each one, building my own archive. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about keeping my history straight, so no one could rewrite it later. At 10:14 p.m., I sent one photo to my aunt, a 2014 note from my brother promising to pay me back $500 next Friday. The caption I added was only 2 words: "Never again." She replied with a heart emoji, and after a pause, "That's the right answer." And for the first time, I believed it all the way through. A few days later, the first real test came. I was in the middle of grocery shopping when my phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize. Normally, I'd let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. It was my dad. His voice was overly calm, the kind of calm he used when he was about to pitch something he knew I'd say no to. "Just hear me out," he started, and every muscle in my body tensed. He claimed this wasn't about money, said there was a family situation that needed me. No details, just urgency. I asked him directly, "Does this involve my bank account, my credit, or my name on anything?" He hesitated just long, enough to tell me everything I needed to know. "It's complicated," he said, which was code for yes. I told him I wasn't interested, and before he could slide into the guilt routine, I hung up. 10 minutes later, my aunt texted, "He's testing you. Don't take the bait." She was right, but it still shook me. Not because I wanted to give in, but because it reminded me how easily they could slip back in if I wasn't careful. That night, I went through my locks again, digital and emotional, making sure every barrier I'd built was still solid. The next morning, a different number tried calling me. This time I didn't answer. Later, I learned it was my brother, leaving a voicemail about how Mom's been crying, and things don't have to be this way. I deleted it without listening to the rest. It was strange. The more distance I put between us, the more I could see the pattern clearly. Crisis, pressure, promise, repeat. My aunt called that evening to check in, and we ended up talking for 2 hours about everything except them. Books we'd read, movies we wanted to watch, a new restaurant she'd found. When I hung up, I realized that for the first time in years, I'd had a conversation with a family member that didn't leave me exhausted or angry, and that was when it hit me. Maybe the real revenge wasn't cutting them off with some dramatic final act. Maybe it was living so well without them that they couldn't stand it. 3 months later, their absence was no longer a hole in my life. It was a boundary line so solid I couldn't imagine crossing it. I'd moved to a new apartment in a part of the city they didn't know, switched banks entirely, and even changed my phone number. The first weeks had been hard. Muscle memory made me want to explain myself, defend my choices, soften the edges so they wouldn't see me as cold. But I stopped caring about their version of me. My aunt and I built our own traditions: Sunday dinners, thrift store hunts, afternoon walks where we'd talk about plans instead of problems. And the more I stayed out of their orbit, the clearer the past became. I started therapy, bringing in that shoebox of IOUs and printouts, laying it all out for someone who didn't have a stake in the story. My therapist called it pattern recognition, and once I saw the pattern, I couldn't unsee it. They'd raised me to believe my worth was tied to how much I could give them, not who I was without them. And I'd been paying for that belief, in actual dollars, for over a decade. One Saturday in early spring, I ran into a distant relative at a farmer's market. She looked surprised to see me, and after some small talk, she said, "I heard things got messy, but you look happy." I told her, "They did. And I am." No defending, no extra explanation, just the truth. Later that day, back in my apartment, I thought about how different that answer would have been a year ago, how much I would have tried to justify or fix. Now, I wasn't interested in fixing what wasn't mine to fix. I'd left the group chat, the guilt, the unending cycle, and they hadn't followed me here. That night, I got a text from my aunt. A photo of her at her kitchen table with a cup of tea captioned, "We won." I smiled because she was right. Not in the way people think of revenge. No big courtroom scene, no explosive confrontation, but in the quiet, steady reclaiming of my own life. And maybe they still told their version of the story at family gatherings, casting me as ungrateful, cold, selfish. Let them. Because every time I locked another door, they once had the key. 2, I wasn't shutting them out, I was letting myself in. And that, I realized, was the kind of ending they'd never see coming. Story written by me, the creator of Revenge with Sarah. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and share your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one.